Hey guys, this is Brent with Western Equipment, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to install the BM24812 electric bed lift kit on this 2020 XUV590M. So if you'll stick with me here, we'll get started. So starting out, we'll go over what all is going to come in the kit, and then also a few of the tools you're going to need to do this install. So first and foremost, we have our bed lift actuator here. Then next we have our top bracket. Now this bracket is what's going to mount on the underside of the bed. Then we have our lower bracket that's going to mount down onto the frame. Here we have our instruction manual, and then we also have our switch here that's going to do the raise and lower mechanism that'll mount there in the dash. Next we have a couple of safety labels here. Then we have our pins for the actuator and the clips for those pins. And then we have 3 bolts here that are going to be used to mount our lower bracket. And then we have 4 self-threading bolts here that'll be used to mount our upper bracket. Now we also have a couple of zip ties here. These are going to be used in aiding to get this harness out of the way once you have that installed. Now next on the tools, one thing I would suggest is breaking out that drill as you are going to be taking out a bunch of little screws in the front so we can get to where we can install the switch here. And then also you're going to want that drill when we're going on with these self-threading bolts, as it is a little hard to do with a normal ratchet. Now next here we have a couple of star-headed bits here. One is going to be a T40. And the other is going to be a T25. Now, like I said, we have a bunch of those little screws in the front of the machine where these are going to come in very handy to take off that cowling to get back behind to install that switch. Now, we also have here is a 13mm socket, which is going to be used for our lower bracket bolts. And then we have a 10mm socket that's going to be used on these self-threading bolts for our upper bracket. Now I've also got a ratchet here, as whenever we do go to install our lower bracket, we're going to be going underneath the machine with these bolts going into that bracket. So we may not have room for that drill, so a ratchet is a good idea to have around there. So now from here, guys, we'll go to the front of the machine and start taking everything apart so we can install that switch. Okay, so step 1 is just going to be getting our hood opened up here so we can get to the underneath components. So we'll start by taking out these pins here on our brush guard, one on this side and one on the other side there, and then we can just simply pull this down and out of the way. And then next we're going to have 2 straps here on the hood, one there and one here on our other side, and then we can just open this up, and that way we have everything exposed here so we can get these pieces out to put that switch in. All right, so step 2 is going to be removing our storage container and this front panel here so we can get the underneath of the dash exposed so we can mount that switch. So this is where our star heads are going to come into play, removing these screws. We're going to start here with our T25, and we've got 4 screws in this storage container to take loose. So I'll start taking those out now. All right, then once we have all of those loose, we can just lift up and out this storage container, set it to the side, and now we can start working on removing this front panel. Once again, we'll start here with our T25, as we've got 4 bolts across the top, we got 2 down here underneath, and then we'll move up to our T40 and have 2 to remove also. All right, then from here we'll switch to that T40. And we've got 2 more screws to get loose here. One right here on the inside of these 2 frame pieces, and then one on the other side as well. All right, and then once we have all of those loose, we can pull out on this front panel. You can set that out of the way. And now we've got the underside of our dash exposed to where we can install that switch. Okay, so step 3 is going to be installing our switch. And right here to the left of our steering wheel, we have these 3 pop outs. We're going to put the switch in our top left pop out here. So first thing that we're going to do is remove that pop out just by simply lifting up on that, popping that out of there. And then we will go in with our switch. So right here, you'll see that we have these fins that are going to hold that switch in place once we go in. We just want to make sure that our lift is facing up and our lower is facing down, and we just simply push that into place until it clicks there. And now next we'll go back behind here, and there should be a wiring harness hanging loose here with this green end, maybe a different color. But just make sure that your terminals here match up with your pins on the back side of that switch. And then we'll simply just push this connector onto our switch there. Make sure that that goes on smooth, makes a full connection to where that connector and the switch are flush. Okay, so step 4 is going to be getting our bottom bracket mounted. Now, as you see, I've got the seat flipped open. I'm over here on the driver's side, and this is going to mount down below your gas tank here over to the side. So first thing we'll do is set that down and in. And I want to make sure our side with 2 holes is facing the front of the machine. And we'll set that down on, and you'll see that there are holes lined up for it. We're not going to want to go to this first big hole, but we're going to the next hole that we can find next to that. Now from here we'll have to go underneath the machine. That's where we're going to have our ratchet, and we're going to put our bolts in to hold that bracket solid. Okay, so here's the part that gets a little bit tricky. We're underneath the machine here, and you'll see these 3 holes that are lined up, you know, that kind of make that same formation as what's on your lower bracket. So you'll want to reach up here, try to hold that bracket in place, and the easiest thing to do is to try to get this bottom, this furthest one started. That way it'll keep your other 2 in place, because we're going to have to go through some frame pieces to get that going. So if we can just get that started just a little bit there, just like that. Then we can grab our ratchet here. And we've got one started there. And then we'll go to starting our next one here. So we should all 3 be started. And then getting our last one tightened up here. All right, now we can move on to putting on our top bracket. Okay, so step 5 here, this is probably the most difficult step, but if you just bust out the right tools, you can make this pretty simple. So we're needing to put this bottom bracket onto our bed here. So as you can see, you've got tight space to work with, and you're going to have this held up onto the underside of your bed to get it mounted. So one thing I would do is, if you got a C-clamp laying around, or maybe a pair of vice grips that open up wide enough, go ahead and get those out. That way you can have something to hold this into place once you get it lined up. So you'll see that we have the larger end here going towards the driver's side. And you need that there. That way it has the pin connection for your actuator. So what we're going to do is get this lined up as best as possible here. And we'll go in with our clamp. Get that clamp down where it'll stay into place. And we're going to bust out those self-tapping screws and that 13mm socket. And we'll go ahead here and try to get this first bolt mounted in. All right, once we've got that first one started, now we can move across, or you can start your next one down. I would go ahead and move across and get your top one set first, and then we can worry about getting our lower bolts put in. And then last but not least, we can take off our clamp here and we can get our last bottom bolt put in. And then just make sure you snug back up that top one, as we wanted to leave it loose in the beginning to make sure we could line up the rest of our holes. Okay, so our next step is going to be actually installing our actuator. And we're going to want to start by going in with the short side. This is what's going to connect to your bottom bracket. Now we also need to keep in mind that this actuator right here, this big bottom piece, needs to be facing the driver's side whenever we go in. You also want to make sure and get your wiring harness threaded down through. That way you can hook it up down by that bottom bracket so we have power to our actuator. Now this takes a little bit of maneuvering. You just kind of have to find out what works best for you. Once again, I have a tight window here of where this actuator will go through. Now, once you've got that down in, we need to go back and check, see how far off we are from being lined up. And once you have that bottom nub in between the two top pieces of your bracket, this is where we want to go ahead and set our first pin. Easiest thing to do is go around from the back side, closest to the middle of the machine, and then just start to run that pin through. May have to wiggle a little bit on the top of your actuator. So we've got our bottom pin pushed through there, and now we can go ahead and clip it in place. So we'll take those clip pins that go with the main pins, pop that on. That way that stays in place. Now, as you'll notice here, we don't quite have enough without lowering our bed all the way down to connect our top. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and get that wiring harness pulled through, connect it on this side, turn on our switch so we can run our rod on up a ways so we can get that pin set. So we'll reach down through here and find our wiring harness. All right, and then once we have our harness for our actuator, hanging right off here to the side, you should see these connectors. So you'll have this three-way that is a blue and green wire, and then on your actuator harness, it will be green and red. We just want to make sure and pair those up. Make sure those go down snug where it clicks in. Just like that. And then we also have this red and black here. Just want to find its mate right there and connect those as well. All right, now once we have those paired up, we'll go ahead and turn on our switch just to the on position. You don't need to start the machine. And then we'll see if we can get our rod to raise here. As you can see there, it's going up. And that ought to give us enough room to get paired up here with our top bracket. Yeah, that ought to be good right there. So then we'll grab our other pin here. All right, and just like that, we've got them hooked up. Now, all it takes is a couple extra things to finish up this job. Okay, so just a few last little things we need to do before calling this job a wrap. For one, we need to remove these locking pins. Now, these are the pins that these normal latch hooks here would lock into if we didn't have this raise and lower cylinder. So we need to make sure and remove those on both sides so that we don't get ourselves in a bind by lowering our lift and then not being able to raise it because we have it locked into place. So to remove those, I'm just going to pull these pins here. And then the same thing around on the other side. So next what we need to do is make sure and get this wiring harness zip tied out of the way. That way it's not rubbing on this fuel hose here, because you don't want this wiring harness rubbing a hole in this fuel hose and causing yourself all kinds of issues. So take those two zip ties, find the best spot you can to get that up and out of the way where it's not rubbing on that fuel hose before we close everything up. And then also, while we're here in the dash, we want to go ahead and take this caution sticker here and mount it right here next to our switch, just so we know to go ahead and do these things whenever we're performing those loaded dumps. That way, just an extra reminder, you have that sticker, go ahead and slap that on there. All right, guys, and last but not least, we just need to make sure and get everything buttoned back up underneath the hood here. Make sure we get this front panel put back in place with our 4 screws across the top and our 4 down below. And then once we have that done, make sure and go back on with our storage container here. Make sure that fits down into place, and remember to install all 4 of the screws that hold that in place. And then we can simply close up our hood, latch that down, go back up with our grill guard, and make sure that we reinstall the 2 pins for that brush guard. All right, guys, so there you have it. There was the full step-by-step instructions on how to install the BM24812 electric bed lift for the John Deere XUV5 series. Now, if this is something, maybe that you're looking into, maybe you've thought about getting for this machine, I'm gonna put a link in the description below where you can go to buy this directly from me, so make sure and check that out. Also, guys, if you're watching this video, you feel like there was anything that I left out, or you have any other questions or comments, make sure to leave those in the comments section below so I can get back to you. And guys, also we'd ask that if you like this video and this video helped you out, to please go ahead and hit that like button and give us a subscribe, as that helps us out as well. And guys, if you have any other John Deere Gator parts needs, maybe you need more attachments for your machine, you're looking for parts for your mower, your tractor, anything like that, make sure to check us out at west-equip.com/parts for all those needs. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and go buy your parts at west-equip.com/parts.